So finally, we have last team, Ampere. They will present with the title of Comprehensive IMO Initiative for Onshore Power Supply. Please welcome Team Ampere.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, this is Team Ampere. It is a great pleasure to join today's session accompanied by experts in the field of maritime affairs.
Team Ampere will propose an IMO initiative that will ensure a safe and widespread adoption of onshore power supply.
We hope that the adoption of our proposal will alleviate environmental concerns as well as benefit the shipping industry in the long run. Be safe and be clean. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen, Team Ampere would like to thank everyone for taking your time to listen to our proposal amongst the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a great honor to present our proposal on a comprehensive IMO initiative that will ensure a safe and widespread adoption of onshore power supply, or OPS for short. This delegate will start our presentation by providing some background information on OPS. Our second delegate will analyze the problem in the status quo that is inhibiting OPS adoption. Finally, our third delegate will outline our proposal to overcome these challenges as well as the conclusion of our presentation. Ships emit significant amounts of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and NOx, collectively referred to as greenhouse gases. Studies show that each year, 60,000 deaths are directly attributed to air pollution from international ships, which translates to over $160 billion worth of health damages. While it is true that most of the pollution occurs in the open sea, Team Ampere believes that pollution at ports is also a very pressing concern. Ports are often close to populated urban areas, which can mean exposing millions of inhabitants to additional pollution. As indicated in the studies of ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, hoteling emissions contribute to approximately 34% of total diesel particulate matter that pose health risks to the residents in the communities. Pollution at ports is caused by auxiliary diesel engines that power the ship at berth. This is where OPS comes in. It replaces onboard generated power from diesel engines with electricity supplied by the shore. This is a simplified technical diagram. On the shore side, a frequency converter converts the supply frequency that's applied to the vessel. At the ship's end of the connecting cable, the receiving switchboard provides interlocking with the ship's generation system and handles the synchronization to perform a switchover from onboard generation to shore supply. The environmental benefits of OPS are well documented. Studies show that adopting shore power for ships can lead to emission reductions of approximately 92% for NOx, 46% for sulfur dioxide, and 25% for carbon dioxide. These are the results of the study conducted by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. In the case of ports of Los Angeles in California, emissions were reduced by up to 75% since the adoption of OPS in 2005. In Seattle, annual carbon dioxide emissions were cut by up to 36%. Aside from the environmental benefits, the true benefits of OPS is that it is future-proof. Once autonomous ships and electricity-powered vehicles, electricity-powered ships become widespread, OPS will no longer be a choice. It will become a necessity. We note that IMO is considering various measures to integrate autonomous ships into the current regulatory framework. Nonetheless, Team Ampere recognizes that OPS isn't without its limitations. There are two important limitations of OPS technology that must be considered. First is price. The cost to bring electricity from a local grid to the terminal will be in the range of $1 million to $3 million. Costs of ship-side installation can range from $300,000 to $2 million, depending on the ship type and when the equipment is installed. The second limitation is that OPS can only be clean as the sources of shoreside electricity. For a coal-dominated generation mix, carbon dioxide emissions may actually be increased in the worst-case scenarios. This means that shoreside electricity generation should be implemented alongside renewable energy sources in order to maximize the ecological impacts of OPS implementation. This finishes this delegate section of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate, for introducing the OPS. This delegate will continue the proposal by analyzing the problems in implementation of OPS. Wide adoption of OPS requires all related entities to invest in OPS. Such complexity poses an overall dilemma. Apart from intrinsic limitations previously discussed, there lies three problems that must be addressed by the IMO. First problem is safety and standardization. A serious power accident occurred during a first OPS connection at Yangshan Port, China. The absence of universal safety guidelines leaves room for diverse safety problems. Further, the draft guidelines that have culminated from works since the 98th MSC session are not sufficient to prevent the risk of accidents. For example, the exchange of information between the shore side and ship side is only limited to certain operational matters. Also, standardization. This has to do with the compatibility of electrical factors, as many ships do not have the same voltage and frequency requirements. The draft guidelines do not include practical elements such as the placement of the plug connection on the ship side. And second problem is the absence of ship side regulation. Proposals on OPS had been discussed at the 55th MEPC session, but the member states were pessimistic due to lack of adoption at ports and insufficient technology innovation. At the 64th MEPC session, delegates once again discussed the OPS. Proposals on OPS had been discussed, but this time regarding mandatory requirements. However, the conclusion was that the committee should wait until the technical issues are resolved before revising MARPOL Annex 6 to include the OPS. Since the 64th MEPC session, there have been a few more IMO documents on OPS. However, they failed to materialize into a meaningful discussion among the IMO delegates. The past decisions are quite understandable to a certain degree, considering that only a few port states and ship owners had adopted the OPS a decade ago. However, this delegate stresses that the circumstances have drastically changed, as shown in the global OPS market. Thus, the committee now needs to develop a corresponding regulatory framework for shipside OPS. Third problem is lack of accessible information. We know that ship owners and affiliated parties require information when determining their own future investment plans. Information includes on-site data collected during OPS operations, such as berth allocation and performance of OPS equipment, etc. Or it could be the information on whether port states near the shipping routes plan to implement OPS in the foreseeable future. And therefore, there needs to be a semi-permanent institution that can conduct a research on OPS application, a global survey on the practices of ports, and the point of contact for international cooperation. Each solution contained within the proposal addresses three identified problems. A semi-permanent institution will integrate the fragmented information. An OPS legal framework will regulate the vessels. And last but not least, a complete work on safety and standardization will ensure a safe and stable OPS operation. The proposal also falls under the IMO strategic plan SD2, integrate new technology into the regulatory framework. This finishes this delegate section of the proposal, and the next delegate will thoroughly explain our team's solution. Thank you.
Thank you, second delegate, for analyzing the current situation with OPS. Now this delegate will deliver solutions based on our problem assessment. This delegate proposes a research and development board. The board will report its work to the IMO representatives appointed by the MEPC. Further, the board will be funded by OPS fund, which will be explained later. The functions of the board are as follows. Regarding development, the board will look into new technologies on OPS along with providing financial support to research activities of developing countries. Sorry for the slide, and let me readjust the slide. Thank you. Regarding development, the board will look into new technologies on OPS. Sorry. Right. Further, regarding research, the board will maintain a data collection system which will provide relevant information when making an investment regarding OPS. Our proposal complies with IMO's initial strategy on the reduction of GHG emissions contained within an MEPC resolution. The resolution specifically called for research and development activities on innovative technologies. The OPS fund will provide financial resources to the R&D board and will be operated as a multi-donor trust fund established pursuant to IMO Financial Regulation Clause 6.7. Member states should encourage relevant stakeholders to contribute to the fund. The proposed R&D board will be established by creating a new Chapter 5 under Annex 6 of MARPOL. MARPOL Annex 6 specifies regulations for greenhouse gas reduction. Now, this delegate also proposes plans for mandating OPS for ships. We draw upon previous IMO initiatives such as Marine Ballast Water Management System and scrubber systems, which serves as reference points for regulation for shipside OPS. It is more cost-effective to implement OPS for newly built ships rather than modifying existing ones. Thus, regulatory measures should initially target newly built ships. Also, the regulations shall implement different requirements based on berthing time and peak power demand. In case of existing ships, requirements shall target the shipping company's fleet as opposed to individual ships. This lessens the burden for shipping companies that operate multiple vessels. This is because companies are given flexibility to implement OPS for individual ships as long as their fleet as a whole meets the IMO target. The proposed regulations on ships shall be added as a new rule under Chapter 3 of MARPOL Annex 6, which dictates regulations for the prevention of air pollution from ships. Finally, this delegate also proposes strengthening standardization and safety matters of shipside OPS. Unlike the previous outcomes of MSC and SSC, it will not be restricted to discussing operational safety issues. Minimum performance standards under various environmental conditions will be included in the regulations. This delegate further proposes the MSC to add these safety and standardization matters as a new regulation under SOLAS Chapter 2-1, Part D. This is because Part D specifically addresses electrical installations. This delegate would now deliver the conclusion. For each problem analyzed, Team Ampere has proposed relevant actions, which includes amendments to MARPOL and SOLAS. Further, Team Ampere invites the committee to discuss actions that fosters port-side collaboration. while ports do not fall under IMO jurisdiction, there can be non-binding recommendations to ports. Based on the renewable energy usage and trade volume measured in TEU, which embodies the spirit of EU Directive 2014, Article 4. Delegates are invited to participate in drafting these non-guiding recommendations and guidelines, which will be informative for port states seeking adoption of OPS. Team Ampere believes that as more ports and ships adopt OPS, economies of scale will create a virtuous cycle of further OPS implementation. Further, collaboration between various stakeholders would serve as role models for other green port-related initiatives, eventually leading to a zero carbon footprint. This concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if you have any prepared questions, please ask. Maybe from Judge? Yep.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. And so your proposal is to the OPS, onshore power supply, on port. However, is how to already on board to accept to the onshore the power supply. That is my question. Another one is to the how to the control the price of electric. Power supply is the most important thing is the price of electric. Do you have something about it to the making to the balance of price of electric or some idea? I would like to listen to that.
Thank you, sir, for raising thoughtful concerns on ship-side OPS implementation. I would like to answer the second question first. Regarding the second question, you have mentioned that it can be quite difficult and challenging to control the price of electricity. We deeply sympathize with their concerns. If the electricity is fueled by fossil fuels, the volatility of the price can change a lot because the price of fossil fuels can actually drastically change over one night. But this is why we actually hope to implement a generation mix, in which is a method that actually utilizes the renewable energy sources, which is actually shows very stable, stable circumstances in terms of prices. So I hope this answers your second question. And regarding the first question, could you please rephrase the first question as I couldn't understand while I heard it?
Yes, the first question is the ship. Let the ships how to the ready to accept to the onshore power supply. What are you doing? What do action to the on board
Sir, regarding the
regarding accept to the onshore power supply?
if you're referring
For example, for is some the revision or conversion, what kind of need on board?
sir,
The
naturally,
response to onshore power supply.
for the ship side, okay.
Ship side.
I think to make it simple for his question, how can we standardization when we transfer the electricity from the onshore side to the ship, or how can we make standardization, or how can make more internationally standard we make it from onshore side to the ship or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. To that, our team's response would be that the IMO is already working with major standardization groups, such as the ISCE, to develop a standard so that globally, to develop a global standard so that onshore power supply can be supplied without much issues, especially with regards to high voltage onshore power supply. We believe there's already a standard, and now the international community is discussing a standard for low voltage systems. And once they are implemented, we believe that those can be added, amendments to SOLAS, so they can be implemented worldwide.
Thank you.
Next question is from Mayor Salataris.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. One interesting doubt that I have about this is that given that this OPS technology is not yet perfect, what if the situations like blackout within the vessels or things as delay of this vessel like departure causes an economic and technological harm? And what are the recovery plans and how do we cope up with the situations with this proposal?
Thank you for that thoughtful question, sir. That's precisely why we have outlined the necessity for a comprehensive safety and standardization regulation. Some of the concerns that you have mentioned are implemented already in the draft guidelines initially proposed by China at the previous SSC committee. We believe that your concerns can also be added to further revisions upon those guidelines, as well as amendments to the SOLAS as we have presented in our proposal. Thank you.
Ground blue, yeah.
First of all, thanks for your great presentation. And many developing countries already have difficulty in raising funds in terms of scrubber duty. And my question is, what if many developing countries cannot deal with the financial problems when the obligation regarding OPS becomes mandatory by 2025? Thank you.
Thank you for a thoughtful question, ma'am. We would respond to that question in twofold. First, we believe that our proposal targets shipping companies in general. We believe that IMO doesn't have a direct jurisdiction over how individual countries develop OPS systems. So we understand that's a limitation, but we initially designed our proposal to target ship-side OPS equipment. Secondly, I think the concerns that you have raised can be partially addressed by the OPS fund that we have elaborated in our proposal. If these funds gather sufficient amount of financial resources, we believe that they can be used to assist developing companies in implementing shore-side OPS equipment. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to add on the question the delegate has raised, I believe that the OPS fund functions as a mitigation of the environmental effects with corresponding to the UN SDG CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. And I think we have to consider the non-compliance procedure protocols, which focuses on the financial and technological support for the developing countries or the minor companies. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from Safe Recyclers?
Thank you for your great presentation. I have one question. In order to mandate those policy, acceptance of flag authorities is maybe needed. So how can IMO earn those acceptance? And who will be the stakeholders or donors of the multi-donor fund?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. First, with regards to the funds, obviously those funds will have to come in the form of trusts. However, we would like to stress that in January of 2020, 9 shipping associations, including ICS, WSC, and BIMCO, have proposed a similar research and development board that will acquire over $5 billion worth of financial resources over the course of 10 years. These consortium of shipping companies represent 90% of the shipping companies worldwide. We believe that this is evidence of enthusiasm within the shipping industries to develop new technologies that will lead the IMO one step closer to achieving zero carbon footprint. Therefore, we believe that there won't be too much difficulties in acquiring financial resources. Second, with regards to your question on how to mandate these requirements for ships, as we have previously outlined in our proposal, we believe that the IMO has the mandate and the duty to regulate ships if it's in the best interest of the international community. With regards to ports, we believe that that is up to individual states. However, IMO can always work and foster collaboration between ports and ships. Hence, we have included that option in the further action slide in our proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor Salutaris, quickly.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Compared to other issues, the introduction of mass maritime autonomous surface ships is expected to take a lot of time. And considering the expenses, is it really necessary that we adopt the measures as proposed by Team Ampere? Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, sir, for raising thoughtful concerns. Well, our response to the question is that we are in a dire need of implementing OPS. First of all, regarding the economic and financial issues, we believe that compared to other alternatives that use electricity or green energy, OPS is much cheaper and economically beneficial for all the stakeholders. And we believe that concerning the environmental issues and the status quo, we are in a very urgent situation where we have to solve this problem right away. And as our first delegate have mentioned, the pollution at births is quite significant, which means that by reduction of the births, we can actually get one step closer to the zero carbon footprint situation. So I hope this answers your question regarding the necessity of the measures and economic feasibility of the measures. Thank you.